Hello and welcome to a League of Women Voters of Greater Hartford candidate debate. I am Carol Mulready, chairperson of the voter service for the League of Women Voters of Greater Hartford. And I will serve as the moderator of this debate for the 16th Assembly District of Connecticut. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages informed and active participation by citizens in government. We are pleased to bring you this debate and thank the Simsbury Community Television for working with us on this. We also have assistance from volunteer timers, one for each of our candidates, and we also have question screeners because written questions from the audience are going to be allowed at this debate. The audience is encouraged to submit written questions to the screeners, who will help the moderator to avoid duplication in the questions and check for appropriate content for this legislative seat. The debate will be conducted in what is called modified cumulative time format. This format is designed to enable candidates to freely elaborate on their approaches to a variety of issues, unimpeded by strict time constraints of more traditional formats. Each candidate will have approximately 13 minutes of response time during the debate. When speaking, the candidate will be timed by the timekeeper, and periodically the timekeepers will hold up signs indicating the amount of time remaining for each candidate. Candidates are encouraged to rebut and surrebut, responding to their policy and philosophical differences as they perceive them, understanding that the clock is running. If they use up their time in question one, they can't answer any other question. Each round of questions will be initiated by the moderator, and each candidate has an opportunity to address the question before direct debate will occur among the candidates. In addition to the 13 minutes, we have a 2-minute opening statement for each candidate, and the order of precedence for speaking was determined by lottery. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the candidates who have committed their time and energies to this important aspect of democratic processes, running for elective office. So immediately to my left is Timothy Walsack, and in the middle is Robert Kalicman, and to my far left is John Hamilton. Thank you all for coming and being a part of this. Hampton?
Yes.
Hampton. I have Hampton, and I'm sorry.
Well, will that cut into my time?
No. Okay, so we hope this is going to work for you. Oh, yes. Please, everyone in the audience, turn off your cell phones. Yeah, we don't want that interruption for our candidates. All right, so by the lottery, our first speaker for the 2-minute opening statement is Mr. Kalicman.
Good evening. Thank you for coming, to listening to me, and I hope that you'll support me and provide your confidence in me. Briefly, I'd like to explain where I came from before I tell you where I want to go. I was born in Hartford on February 19th, 1933, to Florence Cotter Kalishman and Colonel Nathan Kalishman, Sealer Weights and Measures, City of Hartford. My academic attended the University of Connecticut, postgraduate courses, the University of Hartford. My military service consists of combat war, Korean War, recently awarded the Combat Action Ribbon from the United States Defense Department. Also awarded the Korean War Service Medal, Korean War Presidential Unit Citation Medal, along with campaign and service medals. Served as a platoon sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. Appointments: served as Justice of the Peace, served on the Board of Trustees, Department of Veterans Affairs, under Governor Weicker, Governor Rowland, and the present governor. Served an officer in the American Legion, and I was the commander of the Disabled American War Veterans for 4 terms. Activities, I'm a labor man. I petitioned West Hartford to restore the sanitation workers with over 500,000 signatures. Town council voted against rehiring the workers. For my Democratic friends, I had the honor of serving with Ned Lamont, the candidate for governor of the Democratic Party.
Thank you. And number 2 is Mr. Walzak.
Good evening. I want to extend my deepest appreciation to the Women's League for hosting tonight's event. I also want to thank the custodial staff for making this place look beautiful. I also want to thank those of you for coming out tonight to listen to the sound of change. My name is Tim Walzak. I'm a resident of Simsbury, and like you, my wife Stacy and our 4-legged friend, Herman, are proud to call Simsbury our home. It's also within this town that I'm proud to serve as a teacher, union delegate, varsity coach, and with your help, as your voice in Hartford in November. As you can imagine, as a teacher and as a coach comes with a lot of responsibilities. Responsibilities that I don't take lightly. And I shouldn't, because this is Simsbury. We have a top-notch education program and an A+ sports program. That's why every time I step onto the pool deck, step into the classroom, I know that I'm teaching our future investment of this town and in this state. I inspire those around me to find their voice, act with compassion, and be resilient. That's why it concerns me that the students of today are inheriting the debt of Connecticut tomorrow. It bothers me that I talk to you and you tell me that you're not going to be able to retire, not only in Simsbury, but in Connecticut, even though you love this place and everything that it has to offer. It frustrates me that Simsbury budgets responsibly, and then we bear the brunt of Hartford's bad decisions with higher taxes, cut programs, and so on. It concerns me that businesses, small and large, are not only leaving Simsbury, but also leaving Hartford. The time is now to rechart Connecticut's path, and we rechart that by changing who we send to Hartford. I am humbled to be your student and your child's educator and coach in Simsbury, and I'd be humbled to be your representative in Hartford in November. Simsbury doesn't prosper with a representative with a 100% voting record. If we want to prosper, we need an effective communicator, a proven leader. We need Tim Walzak. I am Tim Walzak, a stronger voice for Simsbury.
Thank you. Mr. Hampton.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this debate, and for SCTV for filming it, and for all of you coming here tonight and all those gathered at home. It's been such an honor to represent you all at the state capitol. I'm humbled and privileged to be your voice in Hartford. I've always listened to you and worked in a bipartisan manner to do what is right. You can count on me to continue to be an independent voice in Hartford with bipartisan results. Today, the biggest challenge facing our state is an unprecedented fiscal crisis, which must be dealt with head-on to secure Connecticut's future. Our children deserve a top-rate education and graduate from college without crushing debt, where we can raise a family, play, and retire, a future for those with disabilities, that they can have equal access to lives of personal fulfillment and dignity, where health care is affordable, where businesses can grow and prosper, and where as a society we honor our veterans and those most vulnerable. These problems will be difficult, and difficult choices will be made. As your representative at the state capitol, I have insisted on fiscal responsibility. You can continue to count on me to remain fiscally responsible, supporting state budget that maintains key funding for Simsbury while keeping taxes at bay. This past year, I introduced legislation successfully with structural reforms which included a spending and bonding cap to address the ongoing state budget crisis. I voted against increases and took key budget votes, leading to the first bipartisan budget in decades. You can count on me to work for you in Hartford because I already am, and I won't stop. Together we can stand up for our hometown and our state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It is now time for our timers to reset their clocks for 13 minutes for each candidate. And the first question is going to go to Mr. Kalishman. Kalishman.
You're right.
Thank you. And we're going to ask that big question that hangs over us all the time about the Connecticut deficit and budget. Our state's budget includes a large percentage of mandatory payments for debt service and ongoing pensions, leaving fewer and fewer options to balance the budget. Which reductions in spending or revenue increases would you support or oppose? Please be specific.
I think the first reduction that we should do, and it's shameful that you as citizens, along with myself, have paid John Hampton over $250,000 in public funding to run his campaigns. This year, he has drawn $37,200 in grant money. $5,000 he raised and he's able to keep. The other portion is given to him in public money, our money, my money, as a grant. Now, the questions that I have, that's the first thing. If you send me to Hartford, that's the first thing I would abolish. I do not collect any public funds. I'm working my campaign out of my pocket. I'm paying for it out of my pocket. I am limited to paying $2,000, and that's all I can pay. And I swore to it, and I signed my name, and I filled it out and mailed it to the Election Enforcement Commission. Now, I think that's the first thing we have to cut back on. And it's unconscionable. We have people saying they want to cut education, which they did. They want to cut the roads, which they did. The roads in Simsbury, the state roads, are atrocious. It's bump after bump after bump, and not anything's doing about it. And what has the legislature and my friend Mr. Hampton done? They've more or less increased the public grant money that they get. And the other thing that he doesn't tell you, when he draws his $37,000 and he doesn't spend it all, he can take that money at the end and select who he wants as treasurer and give that treasurer that he selected $1,000 of your money. And I don't know what he did his last term. Maybe he'll tell us. But I suspect he didn't give any money back. And it's unconscionable to do that. Now, the next thing I would cut would be the funding that is given to the perks that a lot of these people have. By perks, I mean we had a situation in Simsbury where we had our town planner. He was going off, and he ended up in Hilton Heads. Now, you tell me Hilton Head is a vacation spot, and if you've ever been to Hilton Head, it's very, very expensive. You don't go there for $100 a night. And this is what happened. And this is what is going on in this state. You're paying for their vacations. I'd cut it.
Thank you. And Mr. Walczak, you are next to answer that question. Would you like me to repeat it?
I believe it was, how are we going to stop the spending in Hartford?
Not Hartford, at the legislature.
Well, legislative is part of Hartford, and the part of Hartford is the spending problem. And we have to be quite honest, that's what we do, and that's what we continue to do, and it's not working out for us. If you look at it in terms of what we need to get done, we need an audit. We need to audit a lot of the government agencies that are taking advantage of the monies that are being allocated to them. There are people that use that money inappropriately. That's what we need to do. We need a fiscal audit of each business, making sure that money is getting to the right people.
Thank you. Mr. Hampton.
We must transform our economy from one focused on speculating, spending, and borrowing to one constructed on a solid foundation of educating, innovating, and building. And that begins with putting our state on a path to living within our means. We need to prioritize economic and job growth. We need to cut state spending, make Connecticut more affordable, reform the state employment retirement system, and improve Connecticut's business climate. We have a pension problem in this state and a spending problem. We must fund our pensions, but moving forward to new hires, we must reform our systems where it's more affordable and more in line with the private sector. We have to cut wasteful bonding. We can no longer bond for soccer fields and museums, which I love, but we must focus on our infrastructure, our highways, our transportation, our public service, our core services such as education, technology, and public safety. Those are my priorities.
Thank you. Anyone have a comment back to the
Yeah,
other?
I'd like to make a comment. John just said he wanted to cut funding to museums. Museums are an integral part to education. It gets kids out of the classroom. It gets them to really experience what it is Connecticut has to offer. I got to work at Dinosaur State Park. It's a fantastic museum. I encourage all of you to get out there. Cutting museums is not the answer. Again, we're just throwing out curveballs to distract what the real issue is. We have a spending issue. That's our problem.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment if I may.
Yes?
My question, John, is you're in the legislature. In my opinion, I've never seen you hold a job.
Excuse
You
me,
all had-
Mr. Calitri.
Okay,
We are addressing the budget issue right now. This is a Sir rebut, and you do not ask the questions of the candidates. That is my job.
the elected officials should not be allowed to collect a pension. If I go to Hartford, with your benevolency, I will not collect a pension. I will not take any money. I will work out of my own pocket. There's too much of that going on in Hartford.
Mr. Hampton.
So, like most households, our state has limited pot of money. So before you buy a pool for your house, what are you going to do? You're going to fix your roof. And as much as I love museums and athletic fields and everything else, Connecticut has a fiscal crisis. We have a spending problem. So in terms of priorities, my point is that we need to focus on the safety of our bridges, on the school improvements that we bond for. We bond for emergencies, but we need to prioritize given the current fiscal climate and how we spend. That's how our citizens do it, and that's how the state of Connecticut needs to do it.
Thank you. Going on to another question that has some possible connection. We're talking about the problems with revenue and spending. A lot of research has been done, a lot of white papers have been written about regionalism or regional cooperation in our state and elsewhere. We have 169 towns, each with its own public works, tax collection, library, health services, school system, and more. What do you think of proposals that would have Connecticut cities and towns engage in more cost-sharing policies? What options would you propose or support to encourage regional cooperation? And that question goes first to Mr. Walczak.
I believe when it comes to regionalization, we need to think about where is the majority of the money when we're talking about regionalization. The majority of the money goes to administrators. There's a considerable amount of administrators that sit high up that take in a lot of money. That money does not transcend out to the community. If we're thinking about regionalization, we're not going to group ambulances and fire and any police. That takes away from our security, that takes away from our safety. But as far as administrative practices go, I believe that we can regionalize those practices.
And that next goes to you, Mr. Hampton.
I've been involved with regionalization since my days on the Board of Selectmen. Simsbury's been a leader in regionalization, starting with our own Simsbury Board of Ed and Town of Simsbury, sharing technology, sharing services. We even expanded that to sharing technology and sharing equipment with other towns. Connecticut is a very old-fashioned state with its 169 fiefdoms, and they hold dearly onto their own districts where regionalization can lead to large cost savings, especially in terms of technology, in terms of public equipment and other services. So I'll continue to have those conversations and open to that dialogue at the state capitol.
Mr. Calhoun? Oh, sorry.
Here we go again. If you all think back, under Governor Ribicoff, we were under a regionalization plan. It was called county government. And Simsbury was tucked in where we should be. We were tucked in with Hartford. And our governor looked at the reorganization, and he looked at the judicial courts, and his first move was to change the county judicial system from county judges to superior court judges. And all our judges now are selected for the all state of Connecticut, not just Hartford County or New Britain County or New Haven County. And it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work, because Simsbury and the other towns, and agreeably so, they wanted to get their slice of the pie, and they weren't getting it. And as it still is, I say it hasn't worked, because the large amount of the pie goes to the cities, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Waterbury. And we put the money in, they burn the money up, and we're right back where we're starting from. The regionalization does not work. It's not going to work. And if anybody tells you so, they're not telling you a fact. It hasn't worked, and if it has worked, make 1 or 2 points to me where it's worked. It hasn't worked. And as far as sharing equipment, I think that the Yankee spirit is you want it, you buy it, you own it. And as what we're doing now, look at our highways. The Hot Meadow Street, that's the show place of Connecticut, of Simsbury, the show place. And look at the condition it's in. That's a state road. It's terrible. And look at the others. And now we have a new system where what they do is they take and they don't make a roadbed anymore. They're just skimming off the top and they're recycling it. And that's all you get. You get the same bumps and everything. The only thing they do is they cover it with tar and black. And that's how that's done. So there's no. And as far as pensions, if I can put it in, is these people that work for the state and these people that work for our town, Simsbury, in particular, the public safety people, the police department and the fire department, they go out each day, each and every day, and they give their lives. The policemen that are going out, and that's dear to my heart, is this dope situation has to be corrected. And the policemen that go out every day and save these people put their lives in jeopardy. And after you put your life in jeopardy for 20, 30 years, I feel I owe you something, and I should give you a good pension. You're entitled to it. And it's not as if we're giving anything away, because people are taking the money. Look at the legislature. They never stop in Hartford. There's where the problem is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would you please hold up his time card for him again, please? The time card, thank you. Mr. Hampton, you get the next question first. Some claim that the gasoline tax is regressive, charging more to those who have less ability to pay, and it is becoming obsolete with the rise of electric and hybrid vehicles. How will we fund our local, regional, and statewide transportation issues, in your opinion? And would you please include your opinion about reinstating tolls?
So I think if we're going to have a 21st century Connecticut, and to have a state that shines again and attracts businesses and young people and people to live here and play here and retire here, our roads are in disarray. We need to improve our infrastructure. Our bridges are in disarray. So I think we need to be open to the conversation about tolls. The devil's in the details. I did not support a $10 million study for tolls. I don't think we need a $10 million study for tolls, but I think we have the talent within the legislature on both sides of the aisle to explore that possibility, that we're losing revenue that comes through this state every day. The bathrooms at our rest stops are deplorable. So when you come into Connecticut, that's the first thing you see is boarded up doors and boarded up windows. So I think it's something that we have to look at. I won't commit to that, but I'm open to the conversation. But with that revenue that comes from the possibility of tolls, it must be put into a transportation lockbox and kept for transportation only. And whatever system we devise, we must make sure that our Connecticut residents are minimally hit by the possibility of tolls.
Mr. Kalishman, you're next.
I'm 100% against tolls. We've had tolls in Connecticut. We did away with tolls. I can remember down in Bridgeport where the toll booth was smashed, and I think 10 people lost their lives, all for 25 cents a car. And what do they do? It's just like now. What do they do with the money? They just take and they spend it. And the Democratic Party, they talk about studies for the tolls. And everybody says, oh, we didn't vote for it. The Democratic Party didn't vote for it. How come we have the study? How come Malloy put it down and they borrowed $10 million bonding? If everybody voted against it, why did we have it? That's the problem. We have people in the legislature that they count noses. They know how to count. And when they figure they're going to lose, they don't lose because they get all the Democratic side and they vote and they're the majority. And when they figure they can afford to more or less lose 1 or 2 votes because there may be others that side with them, they more or less count the noses and they say, okay, you can vote the way you want to. And what they do is they vote for something that the vote doesn't count at all. And then they come back and they report to their community, look at me, I voted against this. But when you really look at it, it passed. If you're against it and you have so much influence, why does it pass? And that's the question. What we have to do is we have to get people that will ally themselves with the party that's opposing the Democratic rule in the State House, and that's the Republicans. Unless we have a lot of Democrats that see the light and decide they're going to change. But they're not going to change. And the reason it's not going to change is the Democratic legislature is controlled by the big cities. And the reason it's changing, and you may think you have a say in the government, and you may be told you have a say, but you don't have a say. And a good example is look to the Senate. You have a say there, but it doesn't do any good because they can't stop the downflow. But if you send me there, I will allow myself. I'll be your man, not the Democratic State Central Committee's man. I'm not looking for anything. I don't need anything. I'm not looking for a pension. I'm just looking to be loved. And that's what's missing in a lot in this state is love. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalishman. Mr. Walczak?
Thanks. Going back to what Mr. Hampton said about not voting for the $10 million, true, that's a fact. But he also didn't lead anything to stop it from happening over the budget, over the time that the legislative office was not in session. We're talking about leadership here. If you're going to lead, you're going to step up, not just vote. And when we're talking about taxes, we're talking about those people that are affected by it. Those people in Terriffill that have to drive to Hartford. That's not fair for them to pick up another dime to pay for our overspending. The gas tax, all these taxes are just hiding what we are currently doing wrong. The legislative body, Mr. Hampton, are overspending. Stop pretending to come up with things to hide what we're doing and stick with what we need to get done.
Okay, it is now time to go to the audience questions. I would ask our timers to show the amount of time left that each person has, and if you do not have a figure close to what's left, hold up your number of fingers so that the candidate knows. We can't see the middle one? Okay, so did you note that, Mr. Kalikman? You have 2 minutes left.
Okay. And this is the closing statement?
No, this is 2 minutes to answer questions from the audience. So I caution you to be very careful with how long you speak to answer any question. And
Okay, who
for
would like
those
to-
in the audience who have yet to bring their question forward, we invite you to either raise your hand or bring them forward. So the first question, with the time remaining, is focused on education. What are important issues in education that you would address as they pertain to Simsbury and the state of Connecticut? And Mr. Kalikman, you get this question first.
The first thing I'd like to address is that the legislature voted to pay for people that are here illegally, whether they jumped and came in, or they overstayed their visas, and they had children here, and now we have a situation where our youngsters, my youngsters, have to pay for their education, and if you're unfortunate and you're here illegally, this Connecticut State Legislature voted to pay for your education at the University of Connecticut. I think that's totally unfair, and I think you have to take care of our people first. Like the Japanese have a saying, Ichiban, number one.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Kalikman. I'm warning you about your time that's left, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsack.
As an educator, the number one thing facing our students is test anxiety. They are over-tested. We've taken away what it means to be a student, instead put a number to send to Hartford to get funding. Our students are not numbers. They're human beings that have emotions, and those emotions are real. And every year that goes by, the more technology there is, the more technology, the more access to that, the more mental health issues we are seeing in the classroom. Mental health issues, not only in the classroom, affect their education, but also their peers around them, and them being productive members of society. On top of the education, not only in the classroom, we need to think about those students that need those services. We do a great job in Simsbury at helping students to the age of 21 with disability and intellectual challenges. What we need to do in Hartford is to help see them through after 21. They want to be productive members of society. Their parents want them to be productive members of society. We owe it to them as taxpayers to give them the services, to provide them the support.
Mr. Hampton.
Thank you. Education is the cornerstone of Simsbury. I've supported as a selectman and as a state legislator. I've stood up to the governor when he wanted to cut critical funding to Simsbury's education system. We get punished for our excellence, and I was able to restore that funding. We want to make sure that our teachers' retirement and health plans are made whole, and that we honor the obligations to these folks who put their hearts and souls into their jobs, into their careers. We need to honor the promise that we've made to them. We need to keep our schools safe. I was there in the wake of Sandy Hook, to keep guns out of the classroom, to keep our mental health programs supported, so that students and teachers have the resources they need to deal with complex mental health problems. This year I supported co-sponsored legislation that made a lot of improvements toward addressing school allergies, keeping our school-age children protected as they travel to school, having access to EpiPens. And with regard to children with intellectual and developmental disabilities, I'm most proud of co-chairing the first in the nation caucus, 65 members, bipartisan strong. Our priorities are to make sure that we get families off the waiting list, that we get people after they're 21 into transitional housing, into jobs, into lives of dignity, honor, and respect, and that they are included in all aspects of our community. Those are my priorities.
Next.
Do we have a rebuttal to that?
Pardon me?
Do a rebuttal to that?
Yes, there is.
Oh, fantastic. I want you guys to be very clear when Mr. Hampton says that he championed and co-chaired. Take a look at those documents. Those co-chairs have 45 plus people signed onto it. It's not one person led by Mr. Hampton that penned that paper. So when we talk about legislators and Mr. Hampton, don't mistake activity for achievement. He says that he does this stuff, but is he really achieving what he says he does? A caucus is a great thing, but what are we getting done? That's what the taxpayers want to see. Where is their money? How do we see it being spent? What is it that I'm getting back? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hampton.
And if I may,
Yes. After Mr. Hampton, he raised his hand first.
What we're getting back is students now living independently in the community. I have family members right here in this town, a couple in their 70s who had a child who's now 35. They never thought Danny never thought he'd leave the house. With my support and the support of the caucus, he now lives in independent living. He has supportive housing. He goes to work. He can cook for himself. He can shop. And that's because of the dollars we invested in those programs to give Dan and his family a life of dignity and honor and personal fulfillment. Those are the hard-term results, not just me, 65 other members of the legislature who believe in the worth of these children.
Thank you. Mr. Collickman.
I have to, here we go again. The problem, we have to treat the cause, not the problem. And what they're doing and why you have the cost is because they're treating the problem. There's no reason that with one word you say, oh, I'm going to lower taxes. And then the next thing you tell us is that we're going out and we're going to put this family into a house and we're going to pay for the house and we're going to pay for its upkeep and we're going to pay the bills. How can you do this and not have a higher tax? And the more you do, the higher the taxes are going to be. So you have to decide, not John Hampton, you, what do you want?
Thank you.
And
because of your time, I'm going to...
thank you.
You have about 1 minute left. Okay. So the next question is about what talents do you bring from your day job experience to the legislature? And that question goes first to Mr. Collickman.
I bring to you people leadership. I know how to lead. And it's one thing to be a driver, it's another to be a leader. And a leader, to me, says, let's go. He doesn't say, you go, I'll stay here. That's a leader. And a leader says to his people, go. And the people go and they don't ask him why.
Thank you. Mr. Walczak.
So as an educator, our number one job is communication, and that's what we're lacking in Hartford. As a communicator of 100 plus students, you have all diverse backgrounds, you have to get them all on the same page, and you have to get the job done. That's what I bring to Hartford, is an effective communicator. I also bring leadership, not only in my classroom, on the pool deck, on the track field, but I also present at town-wide professional developments. Those are opportunities that I go and seek. I don't need someone to come ask me to do these things, as I seek out opportunities to help, to further our agenda, to make this place better than it is. My wholeheartedness in the classroom is what I bring to the legislative office. We get things done. We have 180 days. We can't wait till 181 days, 182 days. We have to get it done within that time frame. The legislative office will shut down and be like, too bad. That's not the way we work in the classroom. That's not the way I'm going to work in Hartford.
Thank you. Mr. Hampton?
Outside the legislature, my career has been 25 years in the nonprofit sector. Strategic planning, marketing, and fundraising for nonprofit organizations such as the Alzheimer's Association, the Vietnam Veterans of America, and most recently, the Brain Injury Alliance of Connecticut, dealing with people at their worst and most vulnerable, raising them up through programs and services, raising money for them so that they can sustain lives of prosperity on their own and have the supports they need to live fulfilling lives. I've always been a natural leader, whether it's been on the Aging and Disability Commission, Board of Selectmen, or as a state legislator. A good leader is a consensus builder, bipartisan votes. My record is not one of voting with Dan Malloy or voting with my party all the time or voting just automatically because the button is green. I think through all of my votes. I talk to the other side of the aisle and make a point of that. I talk to our town leaders. I have experience working with constituents every day who contact me to solve complex problems. Everything from fixing their cable to getting their veterans benefits to making sure that they don't lose their home. My work is all about people. Government is all about people and addressing people's problems, sometimes at their worst. But it's the most rewarding experience of my life is to see the benefits that I've reaped in seeing people's lives improve through my efforts.
Thank you. This next question goes to you first, Mr. Hampton. I had you out of order before, but this question goes to you first. There has been a proposal by governor candidates to have an end to the state income tax. Do you agree with that call to end the state income tax?
Well, we are overtaxed, but I don't think it's realistic that we're going to get rid of the income tax. Taxes are certainly needed for our budgets reflect our values, and we need to raise taxes to, or not raise taxes, incur taxes to support our schools, to support our roads, to support our senior centers, to support those with mental health issues, those with disabilities. I don't think it's realistic. I think it's a false promise that we are going to get rid of the income tax.
Thank you. Mr. Kalikman, you're next.
Here again, I'm not going to agree with what was just said. And the reason I'm not going to agree with it is the fact that if you're going to lower taxes, you have to lower services. And you can't go and say you're going to cut taxes with the legislature as it is with Mr. Hampton. They vote for everything. Year after year after year, they increase. So if he says to you, I'm going to decrease taxes, he's not being forthright. He's going to vote for more, and he's going to spend. And he talks about bridges. We had bridges under the previous governors. We had a bridge that fell down. Remember that bridge in Greenwich that fell down and killed 10 people? And what has been done since then with the Democratic legislature? Not one thing.
Thank you, Mr. Kalikman. And Mr. Walczak.
We have seen the two greatest tax hikes in the last 8 years under Malloy, of which Mr. Hampton was part of. What I fail to understand, what I believe Simsbury residents fail to understand, is how is it that we can have the largest tax hike but be facing $1 billion deficit next year? And if you want to call out the pensions, then also call out the legislative pensions for working half the time. I have to work 37 years to find my full pension for a teacher. You're telling me that 10 years in the legislative office, working half days, that you deserve a pension with medical? I think that's what we really need to think about.
Okay. Thank you very much. How can you ensure us that you will be accessible and return calls promptly? And this goes to, I think you, Mr. Hampton.
Is it Mr. Hampton or Mr. Kalishman?
Mr. Kalishman is out of time.
Thank you.
I've always prided myself on my access, openness, and transparency to my constituents. Regular office hours, thousands of doors knocked, meetings with constituents on a variety of issues. Constituent services is job one. Again, I get a myriad of calls every day as a legislator. asking for help with veterans assistance, an immigration issue, help with other types of medical assistance, saving their home from foreclosure. It's the most important aspect of a legislator's job, is to remain closely intertwined with their constituents first and foremost.
Mr. Walczak?
As an educator in Simsbury, I'll tell you right now, if a parent doesn't hear back from me within 24 hours, my principal hears about it. So, that being said, communication's huge. But we also need to talk about the fact that Mr. Hampton's been to our union delegations as an education, as a CEA member, and has sat there and listened to our concerns. And we've told him, and then he's gone to the offices in Hartford and done the complete opposite of what he said he was going to do. So, being an effective communicator is one thing, but also telling people, hey, this is what's possible and this is what is not possible is part of being an effective communicator. Just giving people false hopes doesn't make you a good communicator. It makes you a likable guy, great. But guess what? Those are still human beings that you're having a conversation with. You need to be truthful. You need to be truthful to them. Don't let them feel that they're up here when you're going to go to Hartford and they're down here.
Thank you. The next question will go to, let's go to Mr. Hampton. And this question is asking the same question, but from different aspects for the two of you who have time left. What have you done in your years in Hartford specifically to control spending and alleviate the crisis we find ourselves in, from Mr. Hampton? And for Mr. Walczak, what specifically would you suggest to control spending and alleviate the crisis? We want specifics. Mr. Hampton.
Well, I've been a key vote, an independent voter at the state level, sometimes to the dismay of my party. I was the lone vote, the only Democrat in the entire House of Representatives to vote against the CBAC agreement. Not because I don't support state workers, only because it extended the contract 10 years. 10 years of guaranteed wage increases and no layoffs. Well, meanwhile, families with disabilities and seniors and other folks don't get those same type of benefits. It also limits our ability to look at cost savings through privatization, possibly through DMV and other agencies. So I've made very independent votes. I voted for a GOP budget because there was gridlock. Last year, we went way overtime into last fall, which is unacceptable. So I got together with Republicans to create a budget that finally forced a consensus for people to come together to get the job done. Because without a budget, we don't fund our schools, we don't fund our teachers, we don't fund our seniors, we don't fund our public services. So instead of being bipartisan, I rose to the occasion and embraced the other side of the aisle and brought together the first bipartisan consensus budget in a very long time.
Thank you. Mr. Walczak?
Again, going back to the leadership, okay, you were the only one against the Democratic Party that voted against CPAC. How come you couldn't get any of the others of your caucus to follow in your direction if you thought that was a good idea? In taking 9 months to go through a budget, or not 9 months, nine different budget series, the budget you came out with, you guys got hammered with phone calls and emails about the cuts to DSS, to veterans, and then until you got that outrage via email, mail, or phone calls, then you're like, oh, that was a really bad choice. What we need to do is we need to think ahead to think about who's really impacted when we make those budgets. You can't just do it and think that someone's not going to notice. Someone's going to be affected. The funding for a parent inside Simsbury was held hostage while she was waiting for her child to figure out if he was going to get services for the extended school year for the summer. That's not fair to taxpayers. That's not fair to Simsbury residents.
Thank you. This question has to do with the tolls, and the person is asking, is there any possibility that a $10 million toll study could have an idea on how to spend that money effectively? And one idea that I'd like your opinion on is Might we use the money to pay university students, civil engineer students to fix a bridge and also pay off their debt to the university? Mr. Hampton.
Certainly, I think that's a great idea. We have the wealth of talent within our colleges and universities. I don't think we need to pay anybody $10 million or $1 million. I think the students would probably enjoy the experience for free, maybe even getting the credit. But we also have the talent within the legislature, within our different agencies, to figure this out without throwing $10 million out there.
Mr. Walzak?
Do I get a chance to get in here? I've been in here, I haven't made a comment in the last 5 minutes.
Because Mr.
I
Collinsman,
don't
you
think
used up your
I
time.
ran so much time when I
You
had on
used
my
up.
right and left, and they have all this time,
Mr.
and I'm out of
Collinsman,
time.
you used up all your time. I
Oh,
had
thank you.
cautioned you at the beginning.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry I inquired, but
Yes, I
I just had
understand.
to.
Thank you.
If we're talking about universities, we need to also talk about trade schools. We need to talk about the fact that universities are expensive. Students are coming out with debts of, I'm still in debt from my own adventures. And the fact of the matter is that the interest rate on student debt is absurd. I can get a house with a lower interest rate. If we're going to take $10 million to waste on its study, why not take that $10 million to put into a trade school that trains students to come out one day to work on those bridges that we want to build? Why not have these genius hours where you have these moments of asking kids, hey, what do you think is better? Not even just kids, young adults, university students, but Connecticut's got a wealth of knowledge with the people that are in here. We don't need to outsource that. Set a proposal. Hey, tell someone, hey, I'll give you a tax break if you come up with a better idea than this $10 million toll. Use what the resources that we have in-house. Stop saying that we're going to spend money that we don't need to.
Okay, thank you. We are nearing the time for the last question. I will ask the candidates, Mr. Hampton and Mr. Walzak, if they would give Mr. Kalachman another minute and a half to
Absolutely.
join you in the last question.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. So Mr. Kalachman's timer may add a minute and a half to your clock. Thank you, gentlemen. What is the single most important issue, maybe there are two, that Simsbury is facing in the years to come? And what is going to be your first priority at the legislature in helping to solve that? And this will go to Mr. Kalachman first, and then...
the most important issue is taxes. Taxes and taxes. The people of Simsbury can no longer afford these hikes coming out of Hartford to increase taxes. Look around you, and if you're a producer, it's fine. And if you're a worker and you're 85 and you're working, that's fine, because God bless you, you can work. But how about the widow? And how about the fella that can't work, that's living in a house that he worked all his life to have, and then all of a sudden the town raises the taxes because the governor and the legislature has raised the taxes. They tell the people, vote for me, I'll lower the taxes, and when they get bitten by the bug in Hartford, they raise the taxes. That's the issue we have to face. 37 mills, that's not the answer. We have to lower the taxes. Don't fall for it. Demand you lower taxes. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Walton.
The number one issue is affordability, and that's going to come in the case of saying Hartford making the decision that Simsbury can take care of itself. That means their plan is to dump the pensions, dump other funds onto us because we can take care of ourselves. We send more money in taxes to Hartford than we get back from Hartford. That's not fair that we should be picking up other things just because we have an affluent community. Not everybody in here is as affluent as we may think we are. And we need to be considerate about that. The seniors, the veterans, the young kids coming up here want to stay in Simsbury, but they know that they can't because of the outrageous spending that's happening in Hartford. Again, we need to focus on the issue. The issue, we have a spending problem. We keep saying that we're going to raise taxes, we're going to come up with some erroneous way of just disguising what the problem is. Stop spending.
Thank you. Mr. Hampton.
The state needs predictability. The state needs predictability. Our towns need predictability. Our boards of ed need predictability. Our schools, our families with IDD, our most vulnerable need predictability. Connecticut has gotten into a habit of operating crisis to crisis. Every 2 years, grabbing at straws, whether that's marijuana or casinos or short-term goals. Connecticut needs to look long-term, create a strategic plan of what we want to look like at 10, 20, 30 years out, not 2 years out, not operating in a crisis mode all the time. So we need predictability, and especially for our education. Education is key to Simsbury. Education is key to our nation's future, filling the job pipeline, making sure that our parents, teachers, and students have the resources they need. So I will continue to ensure and work toward predictability for our Connecticut residents.
Thank you.
Can I say
Yes,
something?
you rebut? Mm-hmm.
Again, going back to the predictability part, if you go back to Mr. Hampton's first debate when he ran, and you listen to that debate, and you listen to the next debate, it's going to sound extremely familiar. If you want predictability, if you want the same path that Hartford's going on, that's what you're going to get. We're going to continue to be fighting crisis. If Mr. Hampton talks about planning for the future, he's been there for 6 years, but it seems that we're getting worse every single year. It's time for change. It's time to elect someone new, and that would be me.
Thank you, gentlemen. And just for everyone's information who sees this in a taped version, Simsbury is saving money. This room is not air conditioned. And it is about 80% humidity. So this is the point at which you may applaud for the candidates and to thank them. I'd also like to thank the timers that worked with us today, Michelle and our intern Jeff and Carol and our question screeners, Joseph and Mary Beth. So to the Simsbury Public Television staff, again, lots of thanks for making this event possible, and also to other Simsbury residents who have helped set this up. We hope this debate assists you, the voting public, when you go to the polls for the midterm elections for state and federal offices on Tuesday, November 6th, and there you exercise your right and privilege to vote. Thank you all.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.